to India and Ireland, round Africa and back again. We don't really need to know just where we'll go. Maybe Canada, then to Brazil, then through the Alpine foothills. All I really want to know is, can we go? Oh baby, can we go? Round and around the globe.
Welcome to Take Me With You, episode 63. I'm Ryan,
And I'm Cheryl. We are two well-traveled people who want to go everywhere.
but that's not going to happen. So instead, we'll travel vicariously by inviting a guest to share their unique travel stories with us.
Today we're talking to Hillary. Hillary works for the Peace Corps.
Peace Corps volunteer.
Oh, Peace Corps volunteer. Volunteers for the Peace Corps
Yeah.
then? Okay. You are the only person I know who is involved in the Peace Corps.
Okay.
It's pretty exciting.
Well, I'm not a staff person. Like, I don't work for Peace Corps. I'm
Okay.
a volunteer. So
Okay.
that's why I said that.
Yeah. Because it's true.
So you're not an employee,
Right. Exactly.
but you do work for you.
Yes, I do
Complete work for
I
them,
do
but you
work
do not work for
for
them.
exactly. It's the nuances.
It's like
Actually, if we want to really get into the weeds, I am technically right now a Peace Corps invitee because I'm in
Oh.
between my posts and I haven't left for my next one yet. So I'm not a volunteer yet until I do the training and get sworn in.
Oh boy.
But I am a returned Peace Corps volunteer because I already completed one
Blech.
Peace Corps service.
So right now you're just a
So there you
bum?
go. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the technical term.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
you got it, Cheryl.
Hillary is a friend of my sister Lisa, who's been on the podcast a couple times.
Mhm.
You guys have been friends for like 25
25
years.
years. Yeah. What?
Wow.
Yep. So it is pretty fun to welcome you back to the
Yeah.
States for a little bit, and been seeing all your adventures online. But
Mhm.
yeah, before we get into that,
Well, actually, I think I have a set of questions that I normally ask, but I have a couple questions first, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Because I know almost nothing about the Peace Corps.
Great.
So I feel like I need a little bit of background about what the Peace Corps is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't work for them, how can you go places and do work for them if they're not your employer?
Great question. So Peace Corps is a U.S. government agency. It was started
Oh,
by
it's actually
President
part of the
Kennedy.
government.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It has
Okay.
a congressional mandate. So that's why I say I'm not a volunteer right now, because we actually have to meet language requirements and pass an exam before we can get sworn in as a volunteer. And when we get sworn in, we actually swear to defend the Constitution of the United States. So we take the same oath that like other government employees take. So Peace Corps goals, as designed by President Kennedy's directive and the congressional mandate, is to provide services to countries who want them, to send trained people to help with things that those countries ask for, and also to share about American culture, and then to learn about the local culture where we're sent, and then share that with Americans. So we have like this trifold kind of mandate. So that's why I say I'm not a staff person. Peace Corps does employ staff in every country, and also in the United States as like recruiters, as local security managers in country, and then we are the volunteers that those staff people support. So I don't get a salary as a volunteer. I'm a volunteer, but there are Peace Corps staff, and that's why I differentiated it. Yeah.
So you don't get a salary.
Mm-mm.
So how do you buy food?
So they provide, that's a good question. They provide us a stipend so that we can live, but we don't get like a salary. So they give us money that we give to our host families to pay for our rent, utilities, food, internet. And then we get like a little bit of, small amount for like taking the bus places or various things, but we're not earning
Gotcha.
like a salary per se. It's just a stipend. But it's
Gotcha.
enough that you can
Okay.
live. Like as I explain, usually if I was living, say here and earning a salary, I would then be using that money to pay for my rent, pay for healthcare, pay for transportation.
Mhm.
Instead, Peace Corps just provides those things for us. So that's why
Gotcha.
it's different. Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. Thank you. I feel a little bit better now. I was very confused.
and what in life led you to want to join the Peace Corps?
That's a great question. I grew up in, well, you know where I grew up because we were neighbors. But
let's pretend that there are people listening, Ryan, for example, and our listeners who don't know. Let's just pretend.
So I grew up in a suburb outside of Seattle that actually was pretty diverse considering. In my high school, actually, I remember there was a news article done while I was a student there, and we had 39 different languages spoken. Actually, I think your high school had more even. But we lived in a part of the area that had just a lot of people who came from different countries around for various things, for jobs, for whatever. So I just grew up around a large diversity of people from different places, and that was a thing that my family really embraced and supported. And I always just thought it was really interesting to learn about other people and their cultures. And like our school would have, a potlucks where people would bring dishes from all different places and you could try different things and learn about different places. So I think I was predisposed to be interested in exploring different places and learning about different cultures. And then I went to the University of Washington, which is a school that a lot of Peace Corps volunteers come out of. Actually, it's usually one of the top, 5 or 6 or something of large universities to send volunteers or, to have students who graduate from that school and then go join the Peace Corps. And I didn't do it directly after college, but it was while I was a student that I think I heard about it. There was probably like a lunch meeting or something. And I remember going to a few different things and just hearing people who had come back from Peace Corps talking about their experiences and hearing like recruiters tell about what it was. And it sounded really interesting. But at the time I was studying to be a dentist. And so like I didn't really have that in my mind. But later I actually switched and became like a communication and cross-cultural studies major. And then it was more of like a thing I thought like, yeah, I could actually do that. And the timing wasn't right when I finished school, but about 10 years later, well, I don't know, maybe a little more than that than I care to admit. But finally, the timing was actually good. And I had always kind of wanted to do Peace Corps. I had finished my master's degree in international development. And so it really fit well. And actually, I was looking at different jobs and a lot of them required overseas experience and foreign language experience and program management experience that I didn't have. And so I was thinking like, what could I do to get these things? And Peace Corps like popped back into my head, like to get all of those experiences. And so it was really good timing and it would help me actually develop my career even as I was volunteering. So that's why I did it.
That's cool. Okay. So let's go ahead and do our standard 3 questions, and then we're going to dive into more. I'm very excited and interested already. So, Hillary, why do you travel?
So I travel because I've really always loved learning about other cultures, seeing new places, trying new food, hearing different languages. And I think especially now as we have such a globalized world and society, and particularly coming from a country where there's people from literally every country in the world, I think it's really important to know what's going on in the rest of the world and just outside of our country. I know I often get questions like, why do you work overseas when there's so much need here? And I think that's valid, but I also think it's important to know what's outside of us because otherwise, how can we interact with people? How can we have global business? How can we, understand the people who live here that are from other places? And so I like to travel because I like to see new things and learn things that I wouldn't see or know about otherwise.
It's a very well-spoken and well-thought-out answer.
I get that question a lot.
I'll bet. So what type of traveler are you?
So I am kind of like, I would never say I'm an extreme of anything, but almost like 2 extremes. Like I totally love hostels. I love being cheap when I travel, like trying to see if I can get good deals on flights, on transportation, on places to stay. But then I like going to like the fancy restaurant or like I will go to all the museums or something. So I like to save money on the things where I can get a good deal and then like splurge and go to like the really nice coffee shop downtown that is like in all the guidebooks that's expensive, So a little bit of each end of the spectrum because I don't want to miss the really cool things, but then I want to like balance it out a bit. So I won't usually stay in a nice hotel. I'll stay in like the mid-range hostel, like not the cheapest thing you can find, but like try to save money there so that I can use it on experiences and other stuff.
I love that. It just seems
Cool.
like you're really well thought out with, because we've asked guests before, like, and we've been asked, what do we like to save on and splurge on? Because travel can get expensive very quickly. And so it just seems like you've prioritized, like, what do you care about? What you don't care about, don't spend a lot of money on it.
Right. And again, like, I don't usually go to the cheapest place because, first of all, I've been traveling since I was about 22. And I'm a lot older than that now. But I, if you're a woman, especially traveling alone and you're in a country where you don't speak the language, like, it's really important to be safe and to be secure. And so I will always say on the hostel websites, I will read about reviews. I want to make sure that it's, safe area, that it's clean, that the staff are good, that like people haven't had issues there. So usually it's better to go with a little bit higher price in order to make sure that you're in some place where you feel safe and secure and, that you're not somewhere where something terrible could happen. So I think I don't skimp too much, but I will definitely stay in a hostel usually versus a hotel.
So as a single woman who has traveled abroad alone, do you have any other tips for us when it comes to safety when traveling? Yeah,
I mean, I think like just as you would, I mean, most people that are probably listening just live in cities, I would guess, or have been to cities. I don't think it's that different. Like, I don't feel like you need to act and behave differently just because you're traveling. At least to me, if I'm behaving like I would at home, I carry the same purse when I travel abroad, but it has a zipper in it and I carry it in front of me just like I do here. So it's like you have to be aware and pay attention, but you should do that at home too. I do think like as a woman in particular, like you do need to be aware of what's around you. And especially like if you are like if your skin color doesn't match like the local population, you'll stand out. Like for anybody, like if you go somewhere where you don't look like the local people, you got to be aware of your surroundings. So like, but again, I think like that's something you should probably do a lot of the time. But I just think like do your research ahead of time, make sure that you're going into safe places. Maybe don't walk around too much at night unless you know the area or you're with someone local or you're with a group or, but I think this is just common sense kind of things. At least that's what I would say.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's great. And kind of building off of that, what is your number one travel tip?
My number one travel tip is be flexible. I think I would have said that before I joined Peace Corps, but that is like the Peace Corps motto, like be flexible, because if you're in another culture, things are gonna happen differently than you're used to. The work style is different, the behaviors are different, the food is different. So you just have to like expect that things are not going to go as you plan. I will say like when I first started traveling, I was very like, I had to have a plan. And back then we didn't have all the like apps and, all this stuff we have now, Google Maps, that you can just get on your phone and plan. So you actually had to plan ahead, print your map out, buy your map, whatever. So I would just say like, but be flexible, like have a plan, do your research, know like the top few things you want to see, and how you're going to get between them to like maximize your time. Like if there's things you want to see in one side of the city, try to do those all in the same day, so that you're not wasting time going back and forth. But also if things change, like last night, even just here, I wanted to go to this place and it turned out they were having a private event and I couldn't go. And it's like, well, you can be bummed about it and you probably are, but also that's not going to help anything. So like have a backup plan. And if things change, that's fine. If you meet somebody at your hostel or you meet a local and they invite you to go do something and it's a safe, obviously make sure you're safe. But, sometimes that can be even cooler than the thing you thought you wanted to do. So be flexible. 1 year, a couple years ago, I went to a hostel in Bucharest and we got there on New Year's Eve and found out the hostel had closed 3 months earlier and nobody had told us. Hostel World hadn't told us. The hostel hadn't told us. So we just arrived and we're like trying to get in the store and a local person walking by was like, oh yeah, that place is gone. So then
that hostel's been dead for 10 years.
So you can either be upset or you can figure out what you're going to do. So I would just say like, it's not going to help your trip be more fun if you just start getting really stressed out and freaked out. Like, just try to find a new solution. So be flexible.
It's good life advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is good life advice. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So Hillary,
Mm-hmm.
what trip or travel experience are you going to tell us about today?
So, you guys mentioned Peace Corps. I'm going to tell you about Moldova because that is where I served as a Peace Corps volunteer for the past 2 years.
That's awesome. So why don't you start by telling people where Moldova is?
That was
'Cause
gonna
I don't
be
know
my
that that's one that
question.
every.
If you had to guess,
that's not
where
as
would
common.
you guess?
I've looked at a map, so I know where it is. Ryan, do you know where it is?
It's Eastern Europe, isn't it?
Yeah, it's Eastern Europe. It is right
Yeah,
between Romania and Ukraine.
Okay.
So actually, prior to the Second World War, Moldova was part of Romania, and after that, it was part of the USSR.
Okay.
So it's on the western side is Romania, and then surrounding the rest of it is Ukraine. And Moldova is landlocked. It does not have sea access, but it does have a port at the very bottom tip of the country that has a river that goes out to the Black Sea. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Interesting. So where in the country were you? And you mentioned staying with a family, so we'd love to hear like what was your how was your stay?
Okay. I lived in the southern part of Moldova, in a town called Cahul, which I loved, and I hope everyone goes and visits. I heard rumor that you had someone on here before that did visit there, so that's
Yes, Alex shared a story about going. Well, he went to Romania and he went to Moldova briefly, and actually, there are some facts that Hillary is here to correct. That he said that he went to an asylum and it went to a dance party, but that was the town that Hillary lived in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Cahul is 5 kilometers from the Romanian border, just over the Prut River. Moldova is boundaried by 2 rivers. On the west is the Prut, and on the east is the Dniester. And so it's very close to Romania. So people do come over. There's actually a border between Wanchea, Romania, and Cahul, Moldova. So that if you are in my town and you want to go to the Bucharest airport, for example, you pass through that border. So it's totally possible that people come through there. But Cahul is a town of maybe 30,000 people. It's one of the largest towns in Moldova. So there's a breakaway region on the eastern side called Transnistria. And I, as a Peace Corps volunteer, wasn't allowed to go there because the US doesn't recognize it as an independent country. So I don't really include it. There's 2 cities there that are larger than mine. But if you're just talking about Moldova proper, Cahul is the 3rd largest. So
Hold on. Sorry, I'm going to go into the U.S. doesn't recognize it.
yes.
Does Moldova recognize them as separate?
No. So when Moldova got its independence from the Soviet Union, this little region on the border between it's basically on the eastern edge of Moldova. It decided it wanted to stay part of Russia, part of the Soviet Union. And so it tried to break away. But Moldova doesn't recognize that it's a breakaway. Like, obviously, it is a breakaway region, but Moldova hasn't recognized it as an independent state, and nor has the US or most other countries in the world. They do actually have Russian troops there. And it's just been this like cold conflict ever since the 90s. And actually, my host father in the family that I lived with in Cahul, like he had fought in that war because a lot of Moldovans of that age did. So it isn't an active conflict. Like it has quote unquote borders. They won't stamp your passport, but they will check you if you go in and out. Because the US doesn't recognize it, like it's not illegal for Americans to go there, but if something were to happen to us, our government couldn't help us. And so that's why they don't allow Peace Corps volunteers to go there, because like they can't protect you if something happens to you there. So they Peace Corps really cares about security of people, because obviously living in another country, it's like different than you're familiar with, and like you don't necessarily know locations or culture or situations. And so they were like, just don't go there, which is fine.
Now, I wish you had gone there so you could have seen like you've been to something and a half countries.
Yeah. And you know what? A lot of people did. Like after they finished their service and were not officially volunteers anymore, they went. I just didn't really have the time to do it. It just didn't work out, but it's a fascinating place. I mean, I would encourage people to learn about Transnistria, but I didn't end up going there. But it is very much more like they still have all the Soviet things and like Lenin statues, although you will find those in Moldova too, but not in every place, because Moldova is very much pulled between the West and the East. A lot of people still really identify with Russia and the Soviet Union. And, you know, that's like the Transnistrians really identify more with that. And then some other people identify more with like their Romanian kind of heritage because, you know, it was part of Romania at one point. So it just depends on who you ask. In fact, my town in Cahul, about half the people spoke Russian and half the people spoke Romanian. And they also knew Russian, but the Russian speakers did not speak Romanian. So there's like kind of this split. And like I studied Romanian. That was my assigned language in Moldova. And so there were half the people in my town that I couldn't talk to because I didn't know Russian. So it's very interesting. Yeah.
So what does that language learning look like as a Peace Corps volunteer?
Yeah, so we come in to country with like a whole group of people. So I had about 50 people in my group going to Moldova. And
all Americans?
All Americans, yeah. All Peace Corps volunteers. Well, we were invitees at that point. And then once we get to country, we're considered Peace Corps trainees. Like the lingo is very specific because they don't want to say that you're something that you aren't, right? So when we got to country, we were Peace Corps trainees. We had 10 weeks of intensive language and like job training. And so for 4 hours a day, 6 days a week, we would be in language class. And if you were assigned Romanian, you were taught Romanian. If you were assigned Russian, you were taught Russian. We had only 3 people in our group studying Russian who had actually all studied it in school before. Because as I mentioned before, like you have a congressional mandate and you have to pass language exams in order to be allowed to serve as a volunteer.
Right.
And so if you don't pass your language exams, you can't serve. And so they have an incentive to help you learn a language as quickly as possible. And Russian is just a lot more challenging usually for English speakers to learn in such a short amount of time because we only had the 10 weeks. But Romanian is usually a little easier for us because it's a Romance language. A lot of people have studied French or Spanish, and it has a Latin basis, which a lot of English has too. And so, I mean, I think this is why like most of us ended up learning Romanian. And it was interesting. Most of the people who came in already knowing Spanish learned it really quickly. I hadn't studied language for 10 years prior, and I studied French in school, but only for a couple of years. And so I didn't learn it as quickly. And I also probably should have studied more. But so you have this really intensive training, and I went in not knowing any Romanian and then passed my language exam by the end of the 10 weeks. And I was at like I think, advanced mid-level or intermediate mid-level. Yeah. So, I mean, I could get by. I could have a conversation, very basic, but I mean, you get kind of like this crash course in language. So, and then once you move to your permanent site, you find a language tutor and Peace Corps will reimburse them for your study. So I actually had a little trouble with that just because I lived in a town. So there was more people with like full-time, like 8 to 5 jobs. And then like Moldova is an Orthodox Christian country, and it's pretty conservative, which means people tend to get married really young. So most people were married with children. And so like after work, they would go home to their families. And so it was hard for me to find someone who had free time to tutor me. And then also because of the diaspora, so a lot of people get Romanian passports if they can show that they lived in Moldova or like that their family was in Moldova when it was part of Romania. And if they get a Romanian passport, they can go work in other countries in the EU. And so I actually had 2 different tutors.
Is Moldova not part of the EU?
Moldova is not part of the EU, no. Okay. But it has like partnerships with the EU and with Romania particularly because they have kind of this like brother-sister relationship, you know, like because they speak Romanian and was part of Romania for a while. And so I actually had 2 different tutors who moved to other countries for jobs. So it was hard for me to find a tutor and keep a tutor, but like the ideal is that you continue studying all the way through. And I was lucky that I had 2 other Peace Corps volunteers in my town. And so I ended up studying a lot with one of them. practicing Romanian. The other one was a fluent native Spanish speaker and did not need to study with us because she learned the language so fast. Which was nice for me at the beginning because she could translate for me when I really didn't understand anything at first. So I was lucky, but then I think I got kind of lazy, and so I needed to like force myself to try hard and not just let her translate for me. Mm-hmm.
So what was the actual work that you were doing while you were there?
Yeah. So I worked with a library in my town, and the way that Moldova is divided, it's like districts. So I was in the southern district. It was Cahul district, and my town Cahul was like the main large town for that area, and then there's villages all around in the district that like Cahul is the administrative center for. So people from the villages would come to town for banking or shopping at the market or coming to the library. And so there were village libraries in all of these villages. And my library was like the district library. And so I worked with the librarians there, but I also got to meet all the librarians from the village libraries who would come in for training. So there was a grant from an organization called IREX that helped modernize Moldova's libraries. It was a 5-year grant, and the last year of it was my first year in Moldova. And so our job was to help the librarians learn computer skills and program skills and project management skills, because this grant provided Wi-Fi and computers for the libraries in the country. And then they wanted librarians to know how to like provide programs and things for people to come in and use this stuff, take advantage of it and make use of it. So I worked with the librarians in my library, but also helped them train the other librarians too, and got to know them too, so that they could kind of distribute this out through the whole area. So I worked with them on just internet and computer skills, on creating programs that would be interesting for like all different levels of people. They even without me being there, they already had like programs for like senior citizens and like art classes and different stuff. And then we added more things that they could do with the new technology. And then I taught some English classes too, because that's something people were interested in. So just kind of making the libraries more of like a community space and like helping them find resources and skills to be able to do those things later.
That's cool. Now, is that what you did for the full 2 years that you were there, or did you end up with different assignments during the time?
Yeah, so that was my assigned primary partner. So I did work with them the whole time, but then I also had time to do other projects. So both of the summers I was there, I worked with a leadership camp for high school students that came from all over the country. It was called Wave Week. It was awesome. It was actually an American program that exists in like, I think, Indiana and then also Moldova. So
interesting.
Yeah. So that was great. And then I worked with another program called Technovation, which is based out of the Bay Area. And it's for girls to learn coding and how to build an app to solve a problem in their community. And they learn the coding, they learn business skills, marketing skills, and then they pitch their idea. And actually a team from Moldova won like the whole world competition a few years ago. I think we mentioned I'm going to Albania as a Peace Corps volunteer next, and I wanted to work with people there, and I wondered if they had Technovation, and it turns out that last year a team from Albania won the whole competition. So that's really exciting, especially in these countries where the economy is struggling, and also in countries where women usually people end up getting married very young and having children. To have those kind of job skills where you could even do remote jobs, it's going to add a lot to the economy, I think, and give people options and opportunities without having to move away if they don't want to move away. So I think that's really exciting. Yeah. So I loved Peace Corps for giving me the opportunity to learn about programs like that and like help people develop skills that will be useful for them in the future.
Nice.
We just learned so much.
Right?
So while you were there, I'm assuming you got to do some fun stuff.
Yes.
Too.
So much fun.
We got to hear about the fun stuff.
So my favorite thing about Moldova, and you followed me on social media, I think, while I was there. My favorite thing about Moldova is it's like living in a musical. That was like always kind of my dream.
What?
It literally is. Not that people sing, but people dance all the time. And it is awesome. And everybody knows the songs. And so you'll be like, for example, one day I was just walking through the center of town. It was like Christmas time. There was a big Christmas tree in the center. And someone like turned on music like traditional Moldovan folk music on their phone, and suddenly this group of people formed a circle and started dancing, and everybody knew the steps. And I was like, I am literally living in a musical. This is amazing, because it's like coordinated choreography and everyone knows it, and it was magical. I love Moldovan dancing. I think also the southern part of Moldova is known for its dancing, and I sadly, although I am a dancer, ballet dancer, I never learned the Moldovan dancing really, because the people in my area were so good at it and so fast that I could just never quite pick it up. Probably could have tried a little harder, but I really just loved watching them. About 30 years ago, the mayor of my town instituted like Sunday night dancing. So every Sunday between April and October, when the weather's nice, there's this piazza in town where people come play music and dance, and people come out from the villages and people come from town, and they just dance like for several hours. And I loved watching it.
Oh my gosh, I want to go there right now.
And every holiday, every cultural event, there was always dancing, and it was magnificent. And there were like 4 different groups in my town that were like basically professional. Like people dance ever since they're little children until they're adults, and they would go out of country and compete and win prizes and stuff. And I just adored Moldova for this.
And it's all traditional Moldovan dances.
Yeah, and it's like circle dancing. It's called the hora. Like, I don't know if you've probably seen like Greek or like other Balkan dancing. A lot of these cultures have this like circle kind of dances. Anyway, yeah, it was lovely.
So when Alex was on our podcast and he talked about going to an asylum and talked about older people dancing, can you please explain this to us?
Yes. So I can see, I actually had the same idea when I first was told where my site would be. It said that my host mother worked at the sanatorium, and I was like, what in the world is there? Is there like a crazy, like an asylum? But it turns out that sănătate in Romanian means health, and sanatorium is a place where people go. It's kind of like a Soviet health spa place. So you can actually go there for medical treatment, like if you have a heart condition or various things, but you can also go there for relaxation. So they have like a salt room you can sit in. They have like sauna, they have a pool. It's outside, so only in the summer, and massage and stuff. So it's a sanatorium is a place you go for health, whether it's just relaxation or you actually need medical treatment. And my host mom did work there.
Okay.
She served food in the cafeteria. They have like a hotel attached so that people come and they like stay for a while. And it is usually older people because it's a health place and there's medical treatments. And so it was interesting because I had to walk through there every day. They have a gate on each end, but they're always open so you can walk through. And my house was on one side and town and my job were on the other side. So I walked through it every morning and every evening. And it was usually older people. And often they only spoke Russian, because usually if you were out of school before Moldova got independence in the 90s, you went to school in Russian, and you often like are more comfortable in that language. And so people would always ask me questions and directions, and I learned how to say "Ya ne poнимаю по-русски," like I don't understand Russian, because I only spoke Romanian. And sometimes they also did and sometimes they didn't. But yeah, it was a lot of older people. And like I said, they have a hotel there, so people will come from other parts of the country or even maybe neighboring countries and stay a few nights. And so they have activities. They have like a small theater in there where they'll have concerts or, you know, little dramatic performances. We have a theater in our town that would come sometimes and do shows there. And they do dancing. So like I said, there was a place up in the center of town where people would dance, but there's also like a small area outside and probably also inside. I never went in for it, but when I would be like in the summer walking by, I would see and hear that like outside of the sanatorium, they would have music and dancing. And actually your sister, Lisa, and her husband, Jeff, came and visited me. They just did the Tanzania and Zanzibar podcast. They came to visit me while I lived there, and they got to see that because we were walking home one night and there was music. So I made them go over and watch. And it was really fun just to watch people. Like someone would just start playing music and everyone would congregate and they would all dance and they knew the steps, and it was
so
really cool. So that is probably what your friend saw.
You hear that, Alex?
I mean, it's still cool.
Yeah.
Oh, it's very cool. I think it's just fun to have an explanation. As well.
Yeah,
I'm looking
some
at what
background.
episode. This is from episode 48. and 49. I'm not sure. Probably episode 48 was the one where Alex shared
I think 48,
that story.
I think, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's so fun that somebody else has been to my little town, because it isn't necessarily a place that many tourists go, but it is a very cool place to see Moldovan culture and like see a little bit different things than, you know, just going to the capital. So very cool that he was there.
Yeah, he had a Romanian take him there. So
yeah, awesome.
So what other things, if someone were to go to the town that you spent 2 years living in, what other things would you encourage them to go see and do?
Well, one of the other things that I really loved in Cahul is that it had a lot of those big old mosaics. Like, I don't know if you've seen Soviet mosaics in other towns, other cities. Like, I don't know if, you know, you've been in those areas, but a lot of the countries that were part of the Soviet Union have these grand mosaics that are very intricate and colorful, and some of them take like the whole side of a building. And so Cahul has like several of these, and I loved just wandering around town. And the thing is, the town is big enough that it felt like a big enough place to live, because me coming from a city, I was a little worried, like, what if I get put in a tiny village? You know, you adapt, of course, but I was kind of happy to be in a town. But it's small enough that you could kind of walk across it in about 40 minutes. And so I would sometimes just on a weekend or an afternoon, if I had free time, just go walking around and see what I could find. And Peace Corps does encourage that too. Like, when you first get to site, they want you to kind of find out about your surroundings and what's in your town and where are all the things you need. And so I kind of got in this habit of just walking and finding these really great mosaics and things. So there was one on the Palace of Culture. It's like this big building with like theater and different, like the library was in there. Musical like groups would practice there. And there was like a chess club that met there, different things. And also some of the dance studios practiced in there. And on this whole side of one of the walls of this 3-story building is this mosaic of like depictions of World War II, or maybe even World War I. I'm not sure. I never really could get an explanation of like of who made it or like what it was about, but it was clearly like soldiers, and then like you could see people hugging them like they were coming home and different stuff like that. So that one was one I saw every day because I walked by it all the time. And then further out of town in the sports hall, there was a really beautiful, colorful one. I'll send you some pictures of these. They're just really neat. So I loved those mosaics. And I loved like every town and village in Moldova has at least one World War II monument. I think my town had 5 because it was just a bigger place.
Oh, wow.
And they're just cool because in Moldova, a lot of the towns and villages that, you know, wanted to separate from the Soviet Union, they tore down a lot of the references to those things, to that past and that history. But World War II was such a significant thing. And Moldova being right over there, I mean, Russia lost a ton of people in that war, you know, way more than the US did. And Moldova was right there too. And so every village and town probably had people who went to the war or were killed during the war. Like those troops came into their locations. And so it's very significant, and they're very interesting, and they're very stylized. Like a lot of them were put up in like this brutalist art period. And so I just really liked going around to different towns and places and seeing, you know, what does their monument look like? And like, what is this history? Because it's one of the pieces of history that didn't get removed. So yeah. Those are things I always looked for. Like every town or village I would go to, I'd try to find the monuments. And they all have at the entrance to town, like on the roads, usually like a big city or village sign too. So like I would always take pictures of those because a lot of those are really art pieces too. So monuments and dancing and mosaics.
There you go.
Nice.
So I'd love to hear about the Moldovan people. What's kind of what's the culture like there, like relationally? You know, you mentioned that a lot of people have families, and so it sounds like maybe similar lives to families over here. But kind of like, how do they live their lives? What is it like over there?
Yeah, Moldovans are some of the friendliest people that I've ever met. I do feel like I can say that because I've been in a lot of countries, but they're very welcoming, very hospitable. Like it's Moldovan pride to be hospitable to people. They'll always invite you in, give you all the food you can eat. Every Moldovan family pretty much makes their own wine because Moldova lies in a region that has kind of the same growing weather and climate as like Burgundy in France. And so usually if you are at a Moldovan event, there will be tons of food and like homemade wine.
Wow.
I'm not a wine drinker, so it was kind of lost on me, unfortunately. But I had other Peace Corps volunteer friends who like have family who works in the wine industry in California, and they came to visit and said it's like some of the best wine they've ever had.
Oh my gosh, I want to go.
Which is amazing. Yeah. And I think you can ask Lisa and Jeff too. Like they got to try the local wine. But yeah, Moldovans are just amazingly warm and hospitable. And because I got to work with a lot of youth, I also discovered and the librarians too, even though they're older ladies, but just really creative and innovative. And I was really impressed by that, like the creativity that Moldovans have, and they're very artistic. Like their culture really values like the music and the dance and the traditional things, and they keep those traditions alive, which I thought was really great. A lot of people now, as I mentioned, live abroad, but like still keep strong ties to their Moldovan culture, which I think is really neat.
That's very
so
cool.
One of the things that I know has been happening kind of in sort of Central and Eastern Europe is more of a westernizing, I guess, especially in the younger generations, more fascination with sort of Western and not necessarily American, but just, Western Europe and just sort of a Western type of culture. Did you see that? Or did you see really a lot of people, even in the younger generations, still wanting to hang on to a lot of those traditions?
Yeah, I would say both, actually. Like it's very common to walk around Moldova and see like people of all ages in like jeans and an EA, like a traditional shirt. And like, so that traditional national costume is kind of just worn as everyday clothing, but like not the full outfit necessarily. You'll see the full outfit on like events and cultural things, but like people will also just wear the traditional shirts with like jeans and tennis shoes. So I think there's kind of like this interesting mix. I think because Moldova still in some ways identifies with its like history as part of the Soviet Union, but also identifies with its relationship to Romania. So it's kind of pulled between those two sides. And so it kind of holds on to its history, but also is very modern in a lot of ways. And like, because people live abroad and in the West and in the EU countries, they bring ideas from those places with them. So it was a very interesting place because sometimes I would think like I'm back in time, like there's these things that are still here from, 20, 30, 40 years ago, but then also you can go to like this coffee shop chain in the capital called Tucano that looks just like a Starbucks, so there's both, I would say. Yeah.
That's cool. I think that's a difficult balance for a culture to strike.
Yeah.
Both the, keeping up with the times, but also retaining the value of the past and where you've been.
Right. Yeah.
And it sounds like the culture is kind of has a balance with that, which I think is really cool.
Yeah. I mean, Moldovans really value their culture a lot. And I was impressed, like
That's
every
awesome.
holiday or every town or village has like a city day or village day. And they always have music and dancing, like the traditional stuff and, traditional food and stuff, which is still food that people eat in the everyday. So like the food that my host family makes for events would also be the food we would eat every night for dinner. So I think that, there's definitely like an integration of both modern and traditional in the culture. At least that was my perception. I mean, you could ask a Moldovan what they say. But
So a piece of this being a travel podcast is that I'm always interested how people who live in other places travel. Do they travel? What does that look like for them? Where do they go? So I'd love to hear, do Moldovans travel? And if so, where do they go? And do people in neighboring, and who travels to Moldova? Like what's the demographic of the tourists there?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Moldovans definitely travel. Like I said, a lot of people work in the EU, or they might work in Russia or Ukraine. So they do travel a lot, sometimes just to see family, sometimes to work, but also for vacation. And because I lived in a town, I probably more than if I had lived in a village, I knew people who traveled pretty often. A lot of people go to Romania because it's super close by and people speak the language and they don't need a passport to go there. Even like if you have your ID, I think you can go over the border. Or to Ukraine, like my host family would go shopping in Ukraine because there was a big market just over the border that they would go to because it just was bigger than in our town, so that there was more stuff there. And then so there's, like I said, there's no sea access in Moldova, so a lot of people would go to the Black Sea either in Ukraine or Romania to get to the water, like the beaches in the summer. A lot of people would travel to like Russia because if you speak Russian, it's an easy place to go visit. Yeah, I mean, they travel to all the places that I would travel to when I lived there. So there was a lot of flights available to go to Western European countries. And then there were like easy ways to get to like Russia and Ukraine. A lot of people take buses. Even my friend who moved from my town to England, they took a bus to go there, like one of those big like passenger van things. Like they didn't fly because it's easier when you're transporting things. Because if you're moving or something, you can take it, and it's also just more affordable, and it's really common, so it's not like a weird thing. Like here, I feel like if I was gonna travel to Chicago, I probably wouldn't take a bus, but it's actually just such a common, easily available thing there that it's like the first thing you would think of. So like I went to Odessa when I was living there, Odessa in Ukraine, and it was about like I had to travel to Chisinau, so it was about 4 hours for me to get up there, and then I had to take a minibus thing to Odessa, which was like 4 or 5 hours. So like I don't think I would have thought of that when I lived here, but that was just such a common, obvious way to travel when I lived there that it was like the first thing I thought to do. So I think like that's a difference, is that there's more overland travel and less flying, but the flights are usually cheaper in Europe than they are here because there's less taxes or they're different or something, and there's more budget airlines. And so Chisinau didn't have a lot of budget airlines, but I lived about equidistant from Chisinau, capital of Moldova, and Bucharest, capital of Romania. And Bucharest is a huge city and had a lot of options. And so often I would get a flight out of there and then take a car from my town over to the airport instead of taking the bus up to Chisinau, because it would actually save me money if I flew out of that airport because there was more options and cheaper options. So I think probably Moldovans also would do that. I'm just guessing.
Interesting. Yeah, that is a different mindset as far as what you think of like, oh, that would be your go-to way to travel somewhere.
And the passenger train service in Moldova is not very existent, so like that wasn't really an option. I did take a train out when I left Moldova in August, yeah. And I went to Kiev on the train, and it took forever. I did it on purpose because I had not taken a train in the country, and I love trains, and so I wanted to. And I knew that it would be long and slow and, not super fancy. And it was exactly that. And it was so hot, and I couldn't open the windows. And so I don't recommend doing that in August. But it was an experience for sure. And you can do that if you want.
So if someone wants to visit Moldova, when should they go and where should they go?
So you can go anytime. As I mentioned, there's really convenient flights. That's actually pretty easy to get to Moldova because you can come from a lot of different Western European countries. I flew to Switzerland, to Dublin, to Italy, like various places while I was there, like on vacations. And so it's easy to get there. It's got a climate where it's pretty hot and humid in the summer, and it gets snow and sometimes ice storms in the winter. So if you don't like those kinds of climates, maybe don't go then. But I would say like spring and fall tend to be very short. So, you'll probably either end up with warmer or colder weather, and depending on what you're used to, maybe that's fine. Being from here in the Northwest, I like pretty temperate weather. So it was a little too hot for me in summer and a little too cold in winter, but probably other people are more acclimatized. So in that case, I would say go anytime. I think usually there's more flights available in the summer just because more people are traveling. So like the flight, I took a direct flight between Chisinau and Geneva one time, and then that wasn't offered in the winter, only like spring and summer. So you just check what's available and, see what the options are. But I do think like you can pretty much go any time of year. What to see? Moldova is known for its wineries, and that's something that actually the tourism board is trying to develop is the wine tourism. They've got a pretty good infrastructure for visiting the wineries that are around the capital. There's two big state-run ones called Milești Mici and Cricova, which are really close to Chisinau, that have these wine tunnels that are very cool. They were like Cricova, I know for sure, like it was dug out to get the stone that was used to build Chisinau. And so there's these caves and these long tunnels, and they ended up deciding to use them to store wine. So they have a winery there, and they use locally grown grapes because Moldova is great for growing grapes. And then they just store wine in all these huge tunnels. And if you go to Cricova, you sign up for this tour ahead of time and you can do a wine tasting, and they'll drive you in these little trams through the tunnels and show you different stuff in storage, and it's kind of neat. I made Lisa and Jeff go there with me. And then you can pick different levels of tastings and like how much you want to taste and if you want food and all these things. Milești Mici is similar, but it does not have its own transportation. So you need to rent your own vehicle and provide your own transportation, and it has to have a space in your car for the guide because they have a guide that will just hop in your car and then show you where to go, so that you don't get lost in their mazes of tunnels. And actually they're cool spaces. They even use them for events and things. So they've started this event in, I think in Cricova, that's in February, where they do like music and festivals and like a concert kind of series for a few days, like on a weekend there in the caves. And then also there's a company or organization called Sporter that organizes runs and races, like fun runs and marathons and things, and they've started doing like runs in the wine caves, which are cool. I did one in, I believe it was in Cricova, yeah, and we like did the run in the caves. So it was in January and it was like snowy outside, but we were like running in these caves, and you had to bring your own headlamp because there's no lights in there. So like
oh geez,
that was kind of crazy. They actually even gave you like a mask to, in case you didn't want to breathe the cave air or whatever.
Yeah.
I didn't use it. But that was really neat, and it's kind of cool to see them using these for different events and things. And they are a fun tourist attraction. Milești Mici, I believe, is the one that has a Guinness record for like the most like storage of wine or something. I'd have to look at what the actual thing is, but they definitely have a Guinness record. And then I think maybe they have the most types of wine or whatever. And then Cricova is maybe like the longest cave, or I don't know, something like that. But anyway, so those are fun things to see because you can't really see those in other places. They're like kind of unique to Moldova. And then there's tons of other wineries that have either been there a while or have opened recently. There's one called Purcari, which is over closer to the eastern side of the country. It's gorgeous. It has beautiful grounds with like flowers and everything, and you can do they don't have like caves, but you can do like tastings, and then they actually have a hotel you can stay at. There's Castle Mimi, which has like this huge beautiful building, and they now have like 6 hotel rooms, and they have a pool.
Wait, hold on. A castle that has hotel rooms so you can stay in it?
It's not really a castle.
Is this what you're telling me?
It's called Castel Mimi. It was like the home of some lord or something, so it's huge, but it's not really a castle.
Does it look more like a mansion?
Yeah, it looks like a huge, beautiful like manor house kind of. It's like stone and it's gorgeous. Okay. They had a like Christmas I want to call it turg because that's the word for like a festival kind of thing. Like, in the Christmas markets in like Germany or something, like Moldova has started doing some of these. So like there's one in Chisinau that has now been there a few years. This Castel Mimi like winery has now had one. And then my town in Cahul also, they've put up last year those little huts and, with vendors and stuff. So like these are kind of growing as like an event kind of thing. So like a lot of the wineries will just host these really great events, and you can do tours and tastings, and but yeah, they're really beautiful spaces. And even as like someone living there, like we would go on weekends to like just be in a pretty space and enjoy the culture, because it's very intertwined with Moldovan culture to like enjoy wine. And it's like the harvest in the fall is really important, you know, picking the grapes. A lot of Peace Corps volunteers would like help their families harvest the grapes, process the grapes, make the wine. So that's a pretty significant thing in Moldovan culture. So yeah, I would definitely recommend the wineries. And then there's also some other sites up in the north part in Soroka. There is a fortress that has been there for I don't know how many centuries. I should probably know that. But anyway, it's beautiful. It's right by the river. It's a thing that a lot of people like to go see. And these are places that like the tourism office or your hostel or your hotel can help you arrange like transportation to get to them. There's more sites like this in the north for tourists. I would say like in the south where I lived is not so common for tourists because we don't have as many things like that. There is one winery that I know of that's in Gagauzia. Gagauzia is like the semi-autonomous region in Moldova that the people are more like a Turkic people. They originally came from Turkey, I believe, and they speak Gagauzian and also Russian. They don't really speak as much Romanian in that region. And so they are a little bit different from other parts of Moldova. But anyway, there's this really nice winery down there that's family run. So it's a little different than these big state run ones. And instead of giving you like crackers with your wine tasting, they do a whole meal. And you have to book it in advance because of that. But I did go for my birthday and I took a bunch of other volunteers and a couple of locals too. And we just had this nice meal and they showed us how they make their wine and you know, served us like hot wine because it was still cold then. And so that was a really cool experience. And it's probably a place that not as many people go. It's called Karagani.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was really neat. I think that one part that's really fun about living in a place is that you get to go to more of these kind of like out of the way places that you probably wouldn't even know existed. And you also get to see some of the cultural festivals and celebrations because you don't have to worry about being there at the right time because you're just there for a longer period of time. Yeah.
Right.
That's awesome. Hillary, thank you so much for sharing about your 2 years in Moldova. So with 2 years there, I have a question for you based on the title of our podcast, Take Me With You. If you could take us with you to just one thing in this whole 2-year experience in this whole country, what would it be and why?
Ooh, good question. I think like probably the main thing I would say for Moldova is if you could go the first weekend of October to the wine festival, it's the best because it's all these booths of all the different wineries. And you can obviously try wine. As I said, I'm not really a wine drinker. The other great part of this whole thing is that they have dancing and live music like the whole time. I love the National Ballet. They call it National Ballet. It's like traditional Moldovan dancing more than it is ballet, but I loved watching them. They're amazing. So I would say like that would be like my main, because I think the thing that I loved most about Moldova is all the cultural events and celebrations and how they really keep their cultural things alive. And I love the dancing. So that's a great way to kind of get it all in one event.
That's sounds wonderful. Cool. I love it. And we already kind of know the answer to this, but normally I say what's your next trip, but really I guess it's what's your next place?
So I am in a week leaving to go to Albania to be a Peace Corps volunteer again. So we can do another podcast later when I've lived there for a while.
Yes.
Do you know what you're going to be doing in Albania yet?
I will also be in the community development sector, but I will not find out my partner site or location until the training is almost over. So I don't know yet.
Okay. Okay. But it's going to be a similar process as far as you know. You've got 10 weeks of language training and
we'll be learning Albanian.
And is that, I was going to say Albanian.
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Wow.
Awesome.
We're excited to hear about it. And do you have any travel questions for us?
Well, do you want to go to Moldova? Have I enticed you?
Yes. Yes, I do.
Yes.
It sounds great. How about you, Ryan?
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
I have not been to Eastern Europe. Ryan has. I have not.
Well, it depends on how you define Eastern Europe versus Central Europe.
Slovenians would not consider themselves Eastern Europe.
Okay, maybe I'm wrong. Have you been further east than Slovenia?
I got to pull up a map to see exactly whether it's east or not. Well, I mean, yes, because Croatia, well, yeah, Croatia is a little bit farther east. Parts of Croatia are.
I consider Croatia east because it's like part of Southeast Europe, but I've had Croats tell me like, no, we're Central Europe. So I think you're right. It does depend on your definition.
Yeah.
But like my first trip outside of North America was to Croatia, and I fell in love with Eastern Europe because of that. And so I consider it Eastern Europe. Sorry, guys. But yeah, that whole region, like that's the reason I asked when I joined Peace Corps to be sent to Eastern Europe, was because I just really liked that whole area.
Yeah. It is just a different feel, I think, than what you think of as traditionally Western Europe.
I would agree. Yeah, right? It does have a different feeling.
Which I enjoy.
Mm-hmm. And it also has some different historical experiences too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the people are so wonderful.
Yes, I agree.
Nice.
Okay, so we'll transition into the last part of our episode here called Wish You Were Here. During this segment, each of the three of us is going to share a travel attraction from the different places that we've been, kind of like a little snapshot or postcard of whatever that thing was that says, hey, this was really cool. I wish you were here. So, Hillary, what would you like to do for your Wish You Were Here?
So I was thinking I would give you something else in the region. So I really like Kiev in Ukraine, and it's really easy to get to from Moldova. So I did go there after I finished in Moldova. Now, the thing I'm going to tell you about, actually, I didn't go there this time. I did that about a decade ago when I first went to Kiev, but it's called the Museum of One Street. Actually, I think that was what it was called then, and I just looked it up, and now it's called the One Street Museum, which is kind of a confusing title, but it is a museum of what happened in people's lives on this one particular street in Kiev, like during a certain period of history. So they have, like, you go in this museum and they have different rooms that are set up to look like houses, like you're in a house, but then it has like memorabilia and artifacts from people who lived on that street. And it was just really well done and kind of cool. And I've been in way too many museums, and it was kind of just different, and I really appreciated it. It's also in an area of Kiev that is really cute. There's like this cute little street and a beautiful church, this teal colored church that is gorgeous. And I tried to go in there this time and it was under construction, so I couldn't, which was a bummer. But that whole area is great. It has like little souvenir shops on the street, and some other really great museums. There's also like a Chernobyl museum nearby that's excellent and worth seeing and really sad. Anyway, so that whole area of Kiev is great, but this one particular museum, the One Street Museum, I really liked just because it was a little different and kind of interesting and unique, and highly recommend it.
That sounds really interesting.
That's cool.
It reminds me of an attraction at either Disneyland or Disney World that I went to as a kid, where it was in a theater that rotated, and you watched an animatronic man talk about, like, it was like different stages of his life, and he would talk about like the new technology he was experiencing and what was happening in history. And so you watch like snapshots of this character's life and like what was going on, and the idea of like a theme like that around a museum in history sounds really interesting, as opposed to just history.
Yeah, the way that they organized it was just neat, because you kind of walk through this house and just see like what kind of things people were using and what kind of things people were wearing at this point, you know?
I can't believe I just compared that to a Disneyland attraction.
Well, Disney does an excellent job.
I can. All right, Cheryl, how about your Wish You Were Here?
I'm going to stay very local and very small. I went to a good burger place recently, and I just got to share about it because so I've traveled over I-90 in Washington State quite a number of times now, because I lived in Eastern Washington for a while, and my husband's family still lives out there. So I mean, just like, I'm pretty familiar with driving on I-90 in Washington. There's a really good burger place that kind of in Easton, in the middle of nowhere, and just when you're like, there isn't food around here, even if I was hungry, or, you know, I'll just wait till I get to Ellensburg for something. But it's called Mountain High Burgers, and their burgers and shakes are amazing, and they're so affordable. And I will probably never not go there now. Like I got the root beer shake and it was so good. And so Mountain High Burgers in Easton off of I-90. Check it out next time you're driving over that pass. Yeah. How about you, Ryan?
So my wish you were here is going to be, and I'm going to mispronounce it, so I apologize, is the Staig Ring Fort in Ireland that is just off of the Ring of Kerry. And there's a whole bunch of old ruins of forts and things. But this one was super fun because it's sort of off the beaten path. So when we were there, when we drove up, there was just one other kind of family that was there, and they left before we did. And so for a while, it was just us. And it's literally a ring, and it's all rock. So it's all just built with rock. So these are, I don't know, 1,000 years old or something, and it's still left. There's no like roof on it. It's just kind of this big kind of circle. You have to go down and kind of climb through it a little bit. And then there are stairs of rocks on the inside that kind of go parallel to the wall that goes around. But depending on where you are inside, you can't see the stairs.
Weird.
They just look like they're part of the wall. And then if you get close enough or move off to the side, then you can kind of see enough to see that there's stairs there, and you can climb up, and then you can just kind of walk around the top of the fort. And it's not completely flat. So it's kind of this kind of up and down thing. It's not super big, but you can see down. It's kind of in this valley, and you can look over. And if I remember right, you can see the water a little bit if you're facing the right direction. Pull up my pictures and see if
we're looking at pictures
remember.
Right now. The first thought I had was it reminds me of Stonehenge, as far as like this old weird stone structure in a field.
Yeah, I mean Stonehenge are big giant stones,
yes.
And this is not.
Yeah, this is like
These
a continuous
like circular building, like the roof is gone or something.
Yeah,
like you're right. It's
but
very
I think
wavy.
the feel of it reminds me of Stonehenge, as far as like you're like, why are there
probably
ancient
not
rocks?
as old? Maybe I don't know. Do you know when it was built?
I'm not sure.
Do you know what the purpose
No.
of it was? Do they know?
No, but
what
I have
the
it. Hold on.
purpose is?
I have a picture. Hold on. I have a picture of the sign here. So let me see if I can. This is one of the largest.
I'm seeing 1,600 years old somewhere.
Yep, before Christianity came to Ireland.
And it's in County Kerry, it says.
Yep.
Cool.
Wow.
I have not heard of this.
The wall is up to 5.5 meters or 18 feet high and 13 feet thick.
Wow.
Oh, that's thicker than it looked in the pictures.
Yeah.
I guess that's good if you're walking around the edge of it.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's just fun. You don't have to spend a ton of time there. There's not a lot to do necessarily, but it's just really cool to see this thing that's kind of like Stonehenge, like you were saying, Cheryl, but it's just been there for a really long time and is still there, and you can kind of explore.
Neat looking. Wow. It makes me want to go see it.
Yeah. That's awesome. So fun side note, my sister Lisa is in the room with us right now, but cannot hear Ryan's voice because Hillary and I are in one space and Ryan's somewhere else. I kind of want her to guess what she thinks Ryan's wish you were here was based on what she heard us.
Yeah, you should invite her over to the microphone and hear what she, yeah.
I think it's a castle in Ireland, but I wasn't paying a ton of attention.
Very close.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
I actually want to know, because Lisa did visit me in Moldova. I just want to know like what her favorite like thing was that she either saw or experienced in Moldova.
Okay, Lisa.
So we're adding these things to this.
Probably the hospitality of your host family. It was really special.
Thanks.
That's cute.
Oh, yeah. Lisa's showing us a picture of the river, the Dniester River that we saw from when we were up in Soroka. There's another monument called the Candle Monument. Yeah, I don't know if Ryan can see it.
Maybe. If you hold it there for a minute, it'll adjust. It will.
Anyway,
it's still pretty bright.
We could get a really good view of the river from this candle
Oh, okay,
monument,
yeah.
like the Thanksgiving monument that's up on a hill also in Soroka, like in the same area where that fortress is. So that's something that people usually go visit. Yeah.
Wow, what amazing
That's
pictures we all just looked at.
Without you.
That works so well for a podcast.
But I'm trying to
Right.
transition into the end of our show. So speaking of looking at pictures and social media, Hillary, do you have anything that you would like to plug?
Yeah, so if you want to learn a little more about my time in Moldova, I had a blog while I was there. It's called mossbackinmoldova.blogspot.com. It's just how it sounds, MOSSBACK. And I also will have a Instagram and Facebook and blog for Albania called Left Coast Wanderings. So you can just search that and you'll probably find it. There's not a lot on those yet, so be patient. Also, if you're interested in Peace Corps and you want to learn more about it, peacecorps.gov. And if you want to support Peace Corps volunteers doing projects in their communities, you can also find a page on there, like in the donate section, if you want to find maybe a Peace Corps volunteer from your area and support them or something. Thanks.
Nice.
Awesome. Cool. If you would like to follow our podcast, we are at Timwy Podcast. That's TMWY Podcast on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter.
You can also email us at timwypodcast@gmail.com and send us, what should they send us this week? Oh gosh,
They should send us free trips to Moldova.
Ooh, sponsor our trip to Moldova. It's going to be great.
Yep.
We'll bring you back wine in 3-ounce bottles on our carry-on. And tell us what Eastern European country you think we should visit.
I'll give you a hint. All of them.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yes.
Well, you know.
Yep. You can also call us and leave us a voicemail to tell us a little bit about things that you're interested in, things you like, tips, suggestions, things you'd like us to do on the podcast, places you'd like us to travel, ways that you want to give us free travel, all of those wonderful things. You can call us at 406-763-8699, or another way to remember that is 406-POD-TIMWY. We would also really appreciate it if you would rate and review us, as well as subscribing to the podcast to make sure you don't miss any new episodes, and share about the podcast on all of your wonderful social media accounts.
As always, thank you to Beth Reed Miller for the use of her awesome artwork. You can check out more of Beth's artwork at Beth Is Something. And thank you to Erica Corbin for the use of her song Round the Globe.
I love that song so much.
Yeah, it's a good one. So she is amazing and talented, and puts out really good music. Yep. So you can listen to her music wherever music is sold or streamed.
That's the end of this week's episode. Hillary, thank you for sharing about your experience in Moldova and about Moldovan culture. It was really, really fun to hear about.
Thanks for having me. I love talking about Moldova, so I'm really happy I got to share.
Yay!
That's it for this week. So until next time, please remember to take me with you.
Take me with you.
Take me with you.
Can we get a sailboat chasing down the sunset as we float round and round the globe? Salty air and balmy nights, guided only by the lights above, and a little love. Oh, the world is out there waiting to explore, and all our troubles here want them to be